Artificial intelligence is arguably going to help drive distribution forward in the short and long term. We've already seen examples today of applications of AI in the hotel industry. Here to take a deeper dive into AI, what exactly it is, what opportunities it offers, and how to exploit it is Daniel Hulme. Daniel is CEO of Citalia, a London-based company that provides AI solutions to industry's hardest problems. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Daniel Hulme to the stage.
Okay, thank you all for staying. I know that it's late and it's sunny outside. I think this is going to be a little bit different to what you're used to. We're going to cover three things. We're going to talk about AI. Everybody's going to go away understanding what AI is and what AI isn't. There's a lot of misunderstanding about these technologies in the press and in the industry, and you're all going to know what it is after today. The second thing we're going to talk about is innovation, how we can bring technology and people together to do amazing things. And the third thing we'll talk about is the end of the world, which is always nice to close a conference day on. So there's going to be about 15 minutes for Q&A, so please store your questions. But by the way, this is going to be very interactive, so I do expect you to be answering some questions. Just a little bit about me. I wear three hats. One is I run a master's program in UCL, which is one of a university in London, one of the leading universities in the world in AI. My entire academic background is in AI over the past 20 years. And I wear an evil corporate hat where I run a company called Citalia, which is about 100 people, and we build AI solutions for lots of different organizations. And I get to travel the world educating academia and politicians and investors and industry about the impact of technology on society. All right, let's talk about AI. Before we get into AI, I want to take you through this technology stack. And before we get into definitions of AI, I want to ask you all a question, which is, what is data? Can anybody tell me what data is? Data's down here. What is data? I'm sure you've all heard the word data. I'm sure you all use data. Sorry? Nearly. Information is here. It's the first answer that everybody. Very good. Very brave. Anybody else? Different? Might learn one thing then at least. So data comes from the Latin word datum, which means given things, stuff. It's the fabric of our universe. It's ones and zeros. It's symbols. It's bits and bytes. So if I say to you 210-280, what is this? It's data, exactly. If you give it, say it's a date of birth, or how much money I have in my account, or a sort code, then it becomes information. So information is data in context. So let's get you started and warmed up. What does this probably say? I know you can do this. Okay, good, excellent. What does this probably say? Okay, you can see that the light that's entering your eyes, the stuff in the middle, is the same data, but you're giving it a different meaning based on its context. I don't know how well this will translate, but if I tweeted right now, my laptop is sick, what does that mean? Just out of curiosity, my laptop is sick. It's great. You got kids? So sick can be interpreted as being something very bad or very good. Certainly if you're under 21 in the UK, sick means good. And if let's get the word big data out of the way. So big data is a very, very confused term in industry. If you look at Wikipedia, which is of course the source of all truth, big data is defined as more data than you can process on a single machine. More data than you can process on a single machine. It often gets confused and synonymized with all of these other words, but it's just more data than you can process on a single machine. So if I asked you to open up all of the Twitter data on your laptop, you're not going to be able to. You have to distribute it to a cloud and process it and get back the results. If I asked you to open up a Hubble image, which is 100 gigabytes, a big chunk of data, you're not going to be able to. It won't fit into memory. You have to distribute it to little parts, distribute it to a computer. So big data, the term will go away, but it just means processing lots of data. All right, what does this say? What does this say? Hi, excellent. So John, it could be an instruction. John, read the letter to Mary. Some people said John read the letter to Mary. I want you to picture in your mind the scene. John read the letter to Mary. John read the letter to Mary. What picture do you have in your mind? John read the letter to Mary. What picture do you have? So a guy is reading a letter out loud to Mary. Yes? Anybody else? John read the letter to Mary. John read the letter to Mary. John could be reading a letter that was sent to Mary. John read the letter to Mary. They could be learning the alphabet, and I said John read the letter A, B, C, D to Mary. John could be reading the book called The Letter to Mary. John could be reading a book called The Letter to Mary. He could be reading 4 words on a piece of paper, The Letter to Mary. He could be reading the letter of the law to Mary. This can be interpreted in over 13 different ways, and we will all go away with a picture in our mind of what we think is correct, and we're probably wrong. And one of my goals in this talk is to convince you all that humans are rubbish. Okay, that's my goal. All right. So imagine if I give you a spreadsheet. And in the spreadsheet, it has 3 columns. It has the date, it has the temperature on that date, and it has the number of ice creams that I sold on that date. Date, temperature, ice cream sales. It's information. What do you do with that information? What do you do with that spreadsheet? Date, temperature, ice cream sales. Yeah. How would you do that? What would you do? Huh? Plot it. Okay, so let's draw a graph. So if we've got temperature along the bottom and ice cream sales here, what would our graph look like? I know you can do this. You can do this, huh? Yeah, you'd see some sort of trend like this, right? This is called descriptive analytics. What we're doing is we're organizing information to try and know things about the world, to find patterns to know things, and that's what I would argue that knowledge is. We can do something very cool. We can do a thing called predictive analytics, which is what everybody's getting excited about, and I'll talk more about this later on, which is we can put a line through it. You can do this in Excel very easily. We now have predictive power. So if tomorrow is 22 degrees outside, I can look at my model and I can see how many ice creams I need to manufacture. And I can take this model and I can put it into a factory. And I now can have my factories manufacturing ice creams based on this knowledge. But can anybody tell me why we sell ice creams when it's hot outside? Why do we sell ice creams when it's hot outside? All right, I'm inside. It's hot outside. What's the first thing that usually happens in the UK at least? Huh? Why do we go outside? We like the sun. It's a scarce resource in the UK. Then what happens? We get hot, and then what happens? We want to cool down, and what do we do to cool down? We buy an ice cream. What do we do with the ice cream? Put it down our pants. What do we do? Huh? Eat it. And why does eating an ice cream cool us down? It's called thermodynamics. So expect a computer to understand that narrative from that line. We're wasting our time. Okay, it's not going to understand that humans like vitamin D and we can cool ourselves down in lots of different ways, which is why it's really important to bridge the people that have domain expertise, people like you, with the people that are really good at finding patterns in data. Because actually your domain expert is going to say, Daniel, your model of the world is wrong. Your factory is going to make some mistakes, because if tomorrow is the hottest day ever, scorching hot, what will my factory do? What will my factory do? It's going to manufacture lots of ice creams, but what will really happen if tomorrow is the hottest day ever, scorching hot? Nobody's going to go outside because they can't reach an ice cream fast enough to cool themselves down. So the model of the world looks more like this. It's really important to ultimately try to understand the world perfectly so we can make good decisions. And I would argue that wisdom is utilizing our understanding to make good decisions. It turns out that humans are terrible at making decisions. I'm going to try and convince you of this now. Has anybody read the book Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman? I don't know if you have, I'd recommend this. Daniel Kahneman is a Nobel Prize winning economist, and he argues that we have a fast brain and a slow brain. So your fast brain is this. What's 2 times 2? You can do this? Good. What's 14 times 763? Okay, that's your slow brain. Okay, let me ask you this. What color is this? Okay, good. What color is this? Okay, they're actually the same color. I promise you the same colored light, the same data is going into your eyes right now, but you're giving it a different context based on your evolutionary history, based on how your brain works. No matter how long you look at that image, you'll always see them as being different colors. I've tried, it doesn't work. So if I put a filter in front of this, I promise you they're the same color. I always get this one wrong, but what color is this? Good, okay, good. What color is this? Okay, good. And they're all gray. Gray light right now, I promise you, is going into your eyes, but you're perceiving it differently. In fact, actually, I'm not going to ask you to do this, but if you held your thumb out, the size of your thumbnail is the extent of your color vision. So all of the color that you see in your periphery is actually being made up by your brain. Your brain is making up a huge amount of the world, and very often we get it wrong. Okay, if I gave you all a questionnaire now and asked you to fill it out for how much you enjoyed this talk, for example, and I asked half of you to hold a pen in your mouth like this, and half of you to hold a pen in your mouth like this, when you're filling out the questionnaire, you are going to fill the questionnaire out more positively than you. Why is that? Huh? Yes, by changing the shape of the muscles in your face, by forcing a frown or forcing a smile, will affect your decision making. Okay, and if I'm going to ask you, you're the photographer, but I'll ask you a question. I'm going to ask you to go and interview somebody. You're not really, and before you do, I'm going to ask you a question. Actually, is there anybody a cup? Before you go to interview them, just hold that a second. What's your name? And where do you work? I take your details, thank you very much. And they correlated the temperature of the cup that I gave this chap with whether he would hire the person. The warmer the cup, the more likely he would hire the person. So we think that we are in control of our decision making, but we are bombarded by stimulus and the dream that we had and the smell of the air in the morning that affects our decision making all the time. There are tons and tons and tons of books out there that will help you convince you that humans are fallible in terms of decisions. Okay, I'm going to ask you a series of maths questions now. I know it's late, but your job is to answer these maths questions as fast as possible. Because if you don't answer them faster than your competitors, they're going to take your market. They're going to sell more hotels or whatever. And so your job is to answer them very quickly. They're going to start out really easy and get more and more complex. Right? Speed is important. So the first question is this. The combined price of a bat and a ball is €1.10. The bat is €1 more than the ball. How much is the ball? speed? 10 cents? Okay, it's not 10 cents, you're not broken, don't worry, you're just biased. So the bat is €1.05, the ball is 5 cents. The combined price is €1.10, the bat is €1 more than the ball. I can give you thousands of these examples, and I promise you'll get them wrong. So think about every single day the decisions that we're making, where we're using our fast brain, and we actually might be getting them wrong. All right, let me ask you this. Imagine these, I don't know, imagine these are staff members. You might be able to recognize some people here, actually, but imagine we understand all of their preferences, we understand their skills, and what we want to do is we want to line up these staff members in a way that satisfies some rules. Now, I'm not going to ask you to do this, but let's say, for example, flying staff members have got to be the right of walking ones, and reptiles have got to be at least 2 away from females, and males prefer to be near females. Can anybody tell me how many possible combinations there are of these 5 staff members? So we're looking at one combination. I can flip 2 around to get another combination. How many possible combinations are there? Huh? Okay, anybody? It's 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. 5 factorial, that thing we learned in school. So there's 120 possible combinations, of which some will satisfy the rules, many won't, but only one will be the best one. One will be the best combination. Let's make the problem a bit more complicated. So I've got 15 staff members now. Can anybody tell me how many possible combinations there are? Don't say 15 factorial, that's cheating. God, does your fast brain say? A lot? What's a lot? Anybody? You know all my questions are trick questions. There's over 1 trillion possible combinations. To expect a human to solve this problem, we're wasting our time. One rule to take away with you today, anything more than 7, don't use a human for. Okay, just remember that. We're useless above 7. Whether you're figuring out how to spend marketing money or figuring out how to allocate people or whatever, anything more than 7, we're useless. In fact, actually, industry don't have problems of this size. They have problems of this size. So here are 500 staff members. Can anybody tell me how many possible combinations there are? It's a big number. It's a number that's over 1,000 digits. And just to put this number into context, this is how many atoms there are in the universe. Okay, significantly more atoms than there are in the universe. And again, we have humans solving these problems. Just to put this into context, one of my clients is a large consultancy. They have 200,000 staff members, 200,000 people that need to figure out how to allocate to stuff. 200,000 factorial. They've got 400 people sitting in a room trying to solve that problem. Wasting their time. Anything more than 7, don't use a human for, okay? Just remember that. Let me just labor this point. I don't know. Imagine I've got my ice cream van, and my ice cream van has got to deliver ice creams to these 24 points around London. So what we want to do is we want to figure out what the shortest path is, the path that's going to save us the most amount of petrol and time. Humans are actually quite good at solving these problems. So if we started at the bottom here, maybe after a few minutes we draw quite a nice path around these points. How long will it take a computer to get the best solution? Shortest path? Huh? Seconds? So 20 billion years. We've played this game already. If you put 24 times 23 times 20 into your calculator, you get this number of possible routes. That's how many possible routes there are around those 24 points. If you had a computer that could look at 1 million routes a second, check 1 million routes a second, which is very ambitious, by the way, it would take 20 billion years, longer than the age of the universe, to go through every single possible one and say, this one that I looked at 10 billion years ago, this one's the shortest one. You should do that. And if I had another point to the map, I've now got 25 times 20 billion years, so 5,000 billion years. If I had another point to the map, I've got 26 times 5,000 billion years. These are exponential problems. They get very ugly very quickly. And again, just to put this into context, one of my clients is a UK grocer, Tesco. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're delivering to 100,000 points on a map. 100,000 points every single day. We have milliseconds between each customer coming in to optimize all of those vehicles to show as many slots back to those customers as possible. We don't have gazillions of years, we have milliseconds. And this is why algorithms are important, because you'll find most organizations that have these types of problems, people are solving them. And people are solving them very badly, I can assure you. So actually, when I build systems for organizations, and by the way, we haven't even talked about AI yet. Most organizations that touch this technology stack is calling themselves an AI company. We'll get on into AI in a second. But when I build systems for organizations, they usually have these 3 components. So the first component is data. And everybody at the moment is going on their digital transformation, which means getting all their data together. And there's this myth that you need all of the data in the world to be able to do interesting things. Now, I want to dispel this myth. I'm going to give you 2 examples. We were approached a few years ago by a low-cost airline. And the low-cost airline said, we're collecting where people are clicking on our website, and we're collecting their purchase history, and we know the name of their dog and what they're going to have for dinner. We know everything about them. And what we want you to do is predict if they're going to churn, if they're going to go and buy from one of our competitors. And I said, okay, so why do you churn? Why do you go and buy from another low-cost airline? Why do you churn? Cheaper. So I said, are you collecting your competitor pricing? They said, no. And I said, well, if you don't give me that data, I'm not going to be able to find the signal. Okay, so it's really, really important that you have the right data, not just tons of it. Let me give you another example. One of these short-term loan companies wanted to predict if people were going to default on their loans. So you borrow like €1,000, and at the end of the month, you have to give you €1,000 back. And they were collecting Facebook data and Twitter data and LinkedIn data to try and profile people. And actually, there were two good predictors. All of that data was useless. There were two good predictors. The first predictor was a font that was kept in their internet cache. And that font was often found on gambling websites. The second predictor was the number of mistakes they made when they were filling out the online application form, which was an indication of whether they're intoxicated or not. So if you're drunk, you probably want to borrow more money to get drunk. And so these were the two good predictors. And so you don't have to have all of the data in the world. You have to have the right data and the right amount of data. And very often that means small. Everybody's getting excited about the middle part, which is machine learning. They're throwing data scientists at these problems, thinking that they're going to solve all of their issues. This is people that have skills that are really good at finding patterns in data, knowing that you're happy and you're sad and you're going to churn and I can upsell to you. These are skills that allow you to know things about the world, to find patterns. But I would argue that industry don't really have machine learning problems. They have decision problems. They have optimization problems. And I would argue that there's a bit of a bubble in this space. Everybody's getting excited about machine learning, but really organizations have optimization problems. The problems that I just spoke about, which is how do I allocate my resources? And there's a massively underrepresented skill in industry. There's probably about 3,000 good optimizers in the world. They used to be called operations researchers. I don't know if you remember that. Some of you might know that. But they're going to have a renaissance over the next 5 years because organizations are going to realize that they need those skills to utilize the data the insights that are being found from the data to be able to do interesting things. And there are very few companies in the world that understand how to actually glue these different technologies together. But if you do, what you have is automation. Give it some data, it goes through a model, it makes a decision. Tomorrow you give it the same data, it makes the same decision. Same data, same decision, automation. What's the definition of stupidity? What is the definition of stupidity? Huh? It's doing the same thing over again and expecting a different answer. So I would argue that most systems that are automation in industry are actually stupid. They're not AI. So there are two definitions of AI. One is a weak definition, but probably the most popular one. The weak definition is getting computers to do things that humans can do. Getting computers to do things that humans can do. The reason why this is a popular definition is because humans are the most intelligent thing that we know in the universe. And so before about 10 years ago, we couldn't get machines to do things that were traditionally in the domain of human beings. We couldn't get machines to recognize whether people were happy or sad. We couldn't get machines to understand how to do natural language processing or chatbots. But about 10 years ago, a new type of technology came along that allowed us to build machines that can do things that are traditionally in the domain of human beings. When we get machines doing that, it means that we call that intelligence. But I would argue that humans are really good at finding patterns up to about 4 dimensions. If I throw a ball at you in 5 dimensions, you're not going to be able to catch it. We can find patterns in about 4 dimensions. We can solve problems up to about 7. Computers can find patterns in thousands, hundreds of thousands of dimensions. Computers can solve problems with hundreds of thousands or millions of variables. So benchmarking human intelligence against machine intelligence is not a sensible thing to do. The better definition of intelligence or AI I've ever found is this one. It actually stems from the definition of intelligence itself. It's a really elegant definition, which is goal-directed adaptive behavior. It's a beautiful definition. Goal-directed in the sense we're trying to achieve an objective. We're trying to sell as many ice creams as possible. We're trying to do revenue management or whatever it is you need to do. Behavior is how quickly can you move your resources to achieve that objective. But if you don't have adaptivity, then you don't have intelligence. If your system is not making a mistake, or making a decision and learning about whether that decision is good or bad, then I would argue that it's not AI. So I guess in your industry, you have lots and lots of different problems that mean that you need to harmonize these technologies. Revenue management is a great one. You need to be able to predict demand. You need to be able to predict the demand in your hotel rooms. And the next one is you need to figure out what is the optimal pricing that you need to make sure that you're maximizing your yield. And these are two completely different technologies. One of my clients is actually one of the biggest hoteliers in the world. And one interesting thing is that, and this might get a little bit confusing, but predicting demand in your industry is what is called a second-order chaotic problem. Let me try to explain this. I've never done this actually out loud before. But some organizations, what they want to do is take lots of historic data, 2 years, 3 years of data, and then try to train models to predict what the future is going to be. They work for what are called first-order chaotic problems. But if you have a system like the stock market, where if you can predict whether it's going to go up or down, and then you make decisions in that stock market, you're changing the history. You're system didn't exist over the past 2 years. So now your model is completely redundant. These are called second-order chaotic problems. And I would argue that organizations that are wanting to do demand prediction and things like that, you need to think completely differently to using machine learning. You need to have systems that are constantly looking at what's going on and adapting to a changing market. For me, adaptation is synonymous with intelligence. Is everybody okay with that so far? There are two types of AI, or two flavors of AI. This is Socrates before he drinks hemlock and kills himself. Now, Socrates is famous for the Socratic method. So if I say to you, Socrates is a man, and all men are mortal, what can I infer from that? I can infer that Socrates is mortal. And AI in the 60s and 70s was us writing down lots of rules and trying to infer new knowledge from those rules. And it didn't really scale. As it happens, I think this is going to have a massive renaissance over the next 5 years. But in the 80s and 90s, a new type of AI came along called neural networks, which are inspired by how biology learn and solve problems. This is the brain of a bumblebee. Bumblebees have 1 million neurons. Their brain can fit on the end of a needle, tiny brain. Bumblebees can do amazing things. They fly around 3D worlds and they talk to each other. They solve problems. They don't deal with windows very well, but ultimately, they're very smart little creatures. And my PhD was trying to model the brain of a bumblebee in a computer. And 12 years ago, it was impossible. We couldn't model brains with 1 million neurons. And about 10 years ago, 8 years ago, a new type of this technology got very scalable very quickly, and we can now model brains with hundreds of millions of neurons. And we can now get these brains to do things that were traditionally only in the domain of human beings. They're often referred to as deep learning. I don't know if you've heard of this. But I would argue these things are really good at finding patterns. Better than humans actually now at finding patterns. But they're not good at solving problems. They're not good at solving problems like this. You need to be able to bring these technologies together with these technologies. And again, there are very few companies in the world that actually know how to do this. So please don't get seduced by this AI hype. I won't bore you with this. This is where it gets a bit philosophical. You might need a drink for this one. But if this is the bounds of human endeavor, if this semicircle is all of the things that humans can do, I would argue that we can probably take any task, any specific task that humans do, we could probably build a system that outperforms us significantly better. Okay, but it's quite inefficient to build individual systems to solve individual tasks. Any IT person will know how horrendous it is to glue all of those things together. So there's an interesting drive in industry and academia to build what is called AGI. You are all artificial general intelligence. You are single systems that can do lots of different things. So can you build one system that doesn't just do one thing, but can you do one system that can do lots of things? It's a very, very hard thing to do. But if you take this to its logical extreme, within our lifetime, it's predicted that we're going to build a brain smarter than us in every single possible way. It is the last invention that humanity will create, and some people think it's the most glorious thing that's going to happen to us. Other people think it's going to be our biggest existential threat. Most people predict it's going to happen around 2050. We have no idea what's going to happen when we build this thing. Actually, if you ask Elon Musk or other scholar, they will say, actually, this singularity, this superintelligence has already happened. I'm going to diverge a little bit. There's a concept called the Fermi paradox. I don't know if you've heard of this, but if you look at the size and the age of the universe is very big and it's very old. And it's 14 billion years old. And if the mathematical likelihood of there being life in our universe is very high. The mathematical likelihood of intelligent life reaching a point technologically like we will soon, where it builds a superintelligence, where it builds a brain that can understand space and physics and time infinitely more quickly than any biological system, is also high. So the likelihood of us building the universe of spawning a superintelligence is high. And the paradox is this, is that when we look into the night sky, we see no evidence of life. Our universe should be teeming with life. And we see no evidence of it. And the hypothesis is that we're living in a simulation created by a superintelligence in a different universe. I might need a drink with this. So, so there's a 1 in a billion chance that this is not a simulation. And if you want me to, I can try to give you some insights in quantum theory about why this might be the case. Anyway, before we, this is called simulation theory, before we build a superintelligence, we're having to build systems that are making decisions about our everyday lives. I'm sure you've all heard this problem before. It's called the trolley problem. So in front of me is a kid. I'm in my driverless car. In front of me is a kid. To the right are 2 adults, and to the left is a cliff. And the car can't stop. Who does the car kill? Who do you kill? Who will kill a kid? Just out of curiosity. No. The 2 adults? You? It's a difficult question. For 2,500 years, philosophers have been pontificating about these things, and we haven't agreed as a species what the answer is. The reason why we haven't agreed as a species is because we haven't agreed as a species what our objective function is. Well, we have an objective function imposed on us, which is like increasing GDP, but really that isn't the right objective function. We haven't agreed as a species what should we be doing. Should we be maximizing life expectancy? Should we be maximizing people's access to happiness, minimizing suffering, maximizing survivability. Actually, I heard that one day we'll have an ethical setting in our car where we want to say we want to kill dogs over cats and grandmas over whatever. And if you're in India and you've got a cow in front of you and a dog, what do you kill? The dog. And if you're in the UK or I guess Spain, you've got a cow, small cow, and a dog, what do you kill? Probably the cow. So even the culture will determine what you decide. And if you've got a burning building, and in the burning building there's a crying baby and a suitcase with $1 billion, what do you save? You're going to save one, huh? Baby? How many babies can you save with $1 billion? It's a horrible question. But if we had a, it's horrible, isn't it? If we had a machine, if we had a robot that decides to go and save the $1 billion, we need to understand why. And he says, well, actually, Daniel, it's because my objective function is to maximize life expectancy. And I think that if I invest that $1 billion in curing malaria, I'll save many, many more babies. This is called explainable AI. So once we build systems that are making decisions about our everyday lives, at some point governments and whatnot are going to say, you need to explain how those systems are making their decisions, because our systems will make wrong decisions and we are going to be accountable for that. And this is a whole world of pain. Again, there are very few companies in the world that understand how to do that. Okay, let's switch to innovation. So just take a moment and just want you to read this slide. So this is a hierarchy. Hierarchies breed certain types of interesting relationships. It's not a picture of my company, by the way. I'm sure you don't have any of these problems in your company. I definitely think that people sell drugs to each other in my company. That is definitely what happens. So this is a hierarchy, and I would argue that this structure is not conducive for innovation. Right? Well, actually, one of the best definitions of innovation that I ever found was by Steve Jobs. He said, innovation is creativity that ships. So what's the most important word in that definition? So who thinks creativity? Who thinks ships? Yeah, I think it's the word that. So all my questions are trick questions. That is the process of taking ideas and getting them to the point where somebody's willing to pay for them. That process is long and hard and painful. The shorter you can make that, the more quickly your organization can adapt to a changing world, the more intelligent you are. And I would argue that this technology stack that I described is going to be commoditized over the next 10 years. We already have access to cheap compute and lots of data. We already have access to all of the free tools that you need to find all the patterns that you need. It's all open source. It's all free. At some point, somebody will commoditize the optimization, and somebody will commoditize the adaptation, the self-learning. The next big battleground for organizations is not technology, it's talent. How can you enable your talent to get them motivated to innovate? And there's a very nice introductory book on motivation by Dan Pink. He said, there are 3 things that motivate people: autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Autonomy is giving people the freedom to do whatever they want. And mastery is giving them the ability to become really good at what they want to do. And purpose is giving them something bigger to align themselves with. And he actually would argue there's a small p purpose now, which is feeling like every day you're doing things that contribute to that bigger purpose. So the first challenge you have as an organization is attracting talent. And I often work with organizations and ask them, where are you on this matrix? How sexy is your brand or your industry, and how interesting or challenging are your problems? Don't answer this question. If you're not sexy and you don't have interesting problems, then you're not going to attract talent. If you're sexy and you've got interesting problems, which, by the way, I think that you do, then you're going to attract talent and they will stick. If you're in the other 2 quadrants, you attract talent and they will churn. And that can be more dangerous to your organization than not being able to attract talent at all. And this will determine whether you're going to build out your own AI team, your own data science team, whether you're going to work with third-party vendors, buy tools off the shelf, blah, blah, blah. But once you've attracted talent in one way or the other, you want to try and figure out how do you create a culture, a structure that enables that talent to thrive. And over the past decade or so, we've seen a flattening of organizations. We've seen the removal of middle managers to try and create thin or flat structures because they're better. Communication can happen more quickly, blah, blah, blah. I would still argue that this is broken. I'm interested in a concept called decentralized autonomous organizations. My company has about 100 people, so it's not big, but we don't have any managers. We don't have any hierarchies. We don't have any KPIs. Everybody's completely free to do whatever they want. They can work wherever they want, on whatever they want, however they want. They can go and create a Satalia pizza shop tomorrow if they want. They might not have a job in 6 months' time because they're not good at making pizza, but if they want to do that, they can. We're trying to create an organization where people are free to do what they want. And just to give you an example, everybody every year makes a public recommendation for their salary. So everybody will publicly declare what they want to be paid, and then everybody votes on whether those salaries should be reduced or increased or kept the same. And we use machine learning to determine how many votes one person has for another. So if I've worked very closely with you over the past year, if I'm knowledgeable about your domain, then I will have more of an influence for your salary than other people. So I had interns voting on my salary and interns voting on other people's salaries that were more weighted than me. Is that not interesting? Yeah? How would that work in your industry? So the question is, can you decentralize decision making? Can you identify who are the right people to make decisions, and can you empower them and give them also accountability as well? And I think that over the next 5-10 years, we're going to see more and more organizations appearing like this. So we're using AI and machine learning at the kind of ends of our organizations to try and profile customers and sell more stuff and all that kind of stuff. We're also using it at the kind of supply chain end, optimizing our resources, blah, blah, blah. But I would argue that if we're not applying these ideas, technologies internally, enabling our organizations to be more innovative, enabling our employees to be happy, to thrive, to have a purpose, to align themselves with, I would argue that those organizations are probably dying from the inside. And so I'd like to see AI being applied more internally. It's just very difficult to write business cases around employee happiness. So we take all of the data from all of our different technologies and we create these visual maps of our organization. And I should say that we're all going on this digital transformation at the moment, but what organizations are really trying to do, and you might not have heard this term before, is they're trying to create a digital twin. Ironically, they're trying to create a simulation of themselves. They're trying to create a simulation of their organization. They're putting sensors on vans and devices and heaters and air conditioners so that they can see what is going on in the organization, so they can see the health of their organization, so that they can react quickly, so they have a digital twin, so that you can ask questions and run hypotheses and adapt that organization to a changing world. Most organizations, their assets, though, are not just machines, they're people. So in my organization, I've got 100 people. So this is a digital twin of my company. Here, for example, we can see that if one of these people leave, we've got a problem. We've got a silo that's happening. We can see that people might be on their way out, disconnecting. So I can use this as a view to help understand how to adapt my organization. It can sound a bit creepy, but this is coming. These technologies are coming. I know organizations that are trying to roll out biometrics internally. So people, this is a sensor actually, this is not a ring. It's capturing my temperature, my location, my heart rate. And these things are coming, and organizations will be using that to try and enable you to be better and more productive and happier at work. And blockchain will unlock these things. I'm sure you've heard of blockchain before. So maybe just to give you a very quick idea about what blockchain will do for the planet. So if I told you that the internet, 30 years ago, if I described to you the internet was a distributed bunch of computers that shared information, it's not very inspiring. It doesn't really give you a picture about the power of the internet. But if I said to you that the blockchain is a trusted decentralized ledger, it's not very inspiring either. But blockchain, imagine in the future you're in your driverless car, and your driverless car knows that you're late for a client or late for work. And so what it does is it starts to negotiate with all of the other cars in front of you and get them to move out of the way. And blockchain will enable this future world where machines are interacting with machines, making decisions to try and make our lives better. And blockchain and AI will enable that future world. We underestimate the power of this technology in the short term, but we overestimate the power of the technology in the short term. We underestimate it in the long term. I don't have time to talk about that. It's interesting. Just one outcome of our pay review is that, like in many industries, females tend to undervalue themselves in terms of their pay. And so if you imagine all of these different dots here are people in my company. This blue one is one of our females. She had 420 votes to approve her salary. She had 36 votes to reduce and 280 votes to increase. So out of everybody in the organization, she had the most votes to increase her salary. So she went away, she came back with a bigger salary. She now has about 500 votes to approve, 0 votes to reduce, but still people are saying, look, you need to increase your salary. You're still undervaluing yourself. And just incidentally, that was me on the end there. So Daniel, you need, and that's not because I build the algorithms either. So these are ways that we could start to use machine learning, start to use also organizational psychology to try and radically change how organizations are run. So actually, I think that AI will actually have a bigger impact on organizational design than it will have necessarily on our revenues. So we've already talked a little bit about, so this is a very good book that I would recommend that suggests eight characteristics of successful companies. We've already touched upon 3 of them. One is, are we a Benjamin Button company? Are we getting smarter and faster as we're getting older and bigger? Are we a talent accelerator? Do we enable our talent to thrive? Do we enable them to innovate? And are we geographically located near talent? Can we access talent, whether it be physically or digitally? And this is very important. This is not important. I'm sure many of you have seen the Netflix series Black Mirror. If you haven't, I would recommend that you go and watch this series. Every single episode is different, but one of these episodes is called Nosedive. It's a dystopian future where technology is somehow being used in a nefarious way. And so every single one of everybody's interactions are being rated. So you'd be rating me now, and I'd be rating you, and you'd be rating the barman and the taxi driver, and they'll be rating you. What it does is it creates this social score. And that social score will unlock faster internet and better hotel rooms and things like that. We think this is never going to happen. But this is now being implemented in China. Right? With China implementing a social citizen score, they don't even let some people leave the country because they've got such a low score. And my concern is that these technologies could be used in a way that creates a dystopian world. And one of the things I'm trying to do is figure out how to solve that. I want to just ask you just very, very quickly, can anybody, it's easy to point fingers at Facebook, but generally tech companies at the moment, there's a bit of a tech clash, but what is Facebook's primary objective? What's their primary objective? Huh? Sell ads? Why do you sell ads? Make money? And if Mark Zuckerberg isn't providing his 5% returns to his shareholders every quarter, what does Mark Zuckerberg do? If it's not investing in innovation and growth, what tends to happen? How else do you make your 5% returns? You might compromise your users, you might compromise your employees, the environment, to try and squeeze out those revenues. And I would argue that this desire, this impulse to continuously to provide shareholder returns means that actually we're potentially creating organizations that are not creating an unsustainable world. And you're going to hear more and more about this in the press. Facebook have 10,000 people whose job it is to keep you looking at the screen, you and your kids. Who's going to win that battle? I actually think there's a future, and this is really important, I think, for you to picture. I think there's a future whereby there aren't companies, centralized companies like Facebook, like Uber, like Airbnb. I think there's a future in the next 5 to 10 years where you can have a platform and somebody can boot up an idea, and people from all around the world can contribute to that idea, whether you're a software developer or a designer or a leader or a salesperson or a marketing person or accountant. You can all contribute to that idea and be remunerated fairly for it. If you can build a platform where you can boot up an open source version of Facebook, and if you can crowdsource thousands and thousands and thousands of people to drive forward that product, and if you can create an economic model that feeds that community, you don't need to have centralized companies anymore. So if every single Facebook user paid 10 cents per year, that's 200 million euros of revenues servicing a community of, 30,000 people globally. If you can build a system that can bring all of the different skills that you need to drive forward a product or a service, which I think will happen, we might see the disappearance of organizations, of companies. I think it's a very, very interesting paradigm. We might even see the homogenization of countries as well. I think the next few decades is going to be a very, very exciting time. So there's two things just to close on that I'm interested in and excited about, and it might sound pessimistic, but if I was really pessimistic, then I wouldn't be here. I'd be on a desert island somewhere enjoying myself. But there are two things that I think that it's important for us all to know and be aware of when we're making decisions. So the first thing is what is called the economic singularity. And economic singularity is whereby there's this nervousness at the moment where AI is suggesting it's going to remove everybody's jobs. And at the moment, AI is removing tasks. And actually, I think over the next 10 years, we're going to see lots and lots of jobs being developed. But there is a concern that if we remove whole jobs, and if we get to the point where those people can't retrain fast enough to get new jobs because AI are taking them, then we get what is called the economic singularity. And we could see a mass of social unrest that I don't quite think that governments are quite prepared for. As it happens, I think that this is solvable. But just to give you an insight, these are some predictions that were made in 2016 about when we were going to fold laundry, have machines that folded laundry, or play Angry Birds, or drive trucks, or in this case, beat a human at Go. So it was predicted in 2016 that it would take 12 years to beat a human at Go. That happened in 2017. I'm pretty sure that if we really put our minds to any of these things, we could probably automate it. It's a very interesting short-term future. The next thing I'm concerned about is what is called the technological singularity, which is where we build a brain smarter than us in every single possible way, and we literally have no idea what's going to happen when this happens. And my concern is that it will potentially remove us from this planet. If we are not cooperating as a species, as a global species, if we're still fighting over GDP and resources and all this nonsense, then I think that this could potentially see us as a threat and remove us. But I am hopeful. I do think that over the next 20, 30 years, we can actually change this. And so just to close, the purpose of my company is to enable everybody to do what they love. How can we create a world where you are all born into a system where all of your basic needs are met, and if you want to go home and play computer games, or if you want to do X, Y, or Z, but everybody is born equal. And I do think that this world is a possible future. And I'm going to stop there, sorry, and open it up to questions.
Thank you very much. Can I remind all of you, the app does have the ability to ask questions, so please do use that because we will be using that to interrogate Daniel here. I am noticing one of the very first things that came up, the question, and I'm sorry this is now late, it was, can you speak a little slower?
Oh, sorry.
So I'm sorry to
sorry.
whoever whoever asked that question, but please do enter your questions in there, and also, can I just use this as a quick reminder to rate this session and any other sessions that you have attended today. That would be really useful for us. Okay, so I do have a couple of questions for you in the meantime. In one of our more recent conferences, there was an explanation that digital basically created this incredible amount of data. So, years ago we were talking about digital and the impact of digital, and then it was, oh, we've got all this data, now we've got big data. And then it was, well, how do we sort all that data? Well, we can only do that through the use of AI and actually begin to make some sense of that. I guess the question I'd pose to you is, what consequence or impact might AI have that we, 5 years from now are saying, here's the consequence of that?
Well, I think that I do, as I mentioned just then, I think that the automation, what people are calling AI, are going to streamline a huge amount of our operations. They're going to enable us to do more interesting things because they're going to free up a load of stuff, free up a load of time. Which I think is a very, very positive thing. But I guess the concern that I've raised is that with these kind of short-term impulses that we potentially have of driving growth and returns, that we're not necessarily thinking about creating a sustainable future. Now, some people think that superintelligence or AIs will solve that for us. That if we do actually get the state of the planet in a bit of a mess, that it'll come along and make things better for us. But like with any technology, these things can be used for good and they can be used for bad. And I guess it's up to business leaders like yourself to figure out how they can be used for good. And there are lots of interesting ethical questions that we can ask ourselves about this. And maybe I can just ask the audience a question. I don't know. So imagine there's a lady called Jane, and Jane lives in Madrid, and there's a shop that opens up in Jane's high street, and she goes to the shop and she walks through the door and she looks around. She doesn't really like what she sees, and she leaves. But on the plaque of the door, it says that they have the right to follow Jane around and collect data about her, and so that they can target her with better products. Which, by the way, when you're signing up to most websites, are doing the same thing. But anyway, John, who is assigned to Jane, is following Jane around, and he can see that she's half Spanish, half Italian. She's a divorced mum. She's got 2 kids. She's a workaholic. She dates younger men. And later that week, John is talking to his friend in the pub and sharing this information because he's allowed to talk about it. And his friend works in a medical company, and his friend said, "That's very interesting. I've got a database, and in that database, I've got 400 Janes. 400 people have very, very similar characteristics to James. Same habits, same DNA, same lifestyle, and a large portion of them have ovarian cancer or a rare ovarian cancer that might kill them." Now, the question is, do you then tell Jane or not? What do you do? Who would tell Jane that she might be susceptible to this? You would tell Jane? Yeah. Who would not tell Jane? Who doesn't know? It's a really interesting question. We need to answer some of these questions. So at the moment, you're probably sitting on very, very interesting amounts of data. Some of those things are going to be great to drive your business forward. Some of them could be very useful for other organizations, medical organizations and things like that. And I think that we need to open up the debate about that. And again, AI will help us unlock those insights that are in that data.
Okay, excellent. First, top question. Are we going to have enough bright and appropriately educated people to manage the technology that you see that we're going to create?
So actually, the bottleneck that I see in industry, and this might be a bit contentious, is not necessarily the technology, nor is it the people that can use the technology. The bottleneck traditionally that I've found is the domain experts in organizations where their time is freed up to help you build a solution for them. So there are lots and lots of people out there that can solve your problems, but actually getting your stakeholders, your senior stakeholders, your CEOs, etc., bought into investing in this technology and investing in people in your organization that can free up their time to help apply and adopt these technologies, that's where I see the bottleneck, actually. So I think that there is, this myth that we need more and more data scientists, but actually I think that the bottleneck is inside organizations.
And what about within the hotel industry? Where do you see the major opportunity for us?
I mean, a huge number of opportunities. I mean, it's one big optimization problem, and so I think there's a number of so there are opportunities in terms of how you potentially allocate staff to your hotels in a much more granular, smarter way, unlocking part-time mums and all of this kind of stuff. There'll be opportunities in moving things around, so redistributing goods. There's opportunities in predicting demand and revenue management. There's opportunities in using these technologies to unlock innovations from within your organization. I know that there are hotels that have innovation platforms and things like that, and try and get those ideas from their employees as opposed to imposing ideas on it. I mean, it's one big optimization problem. And I think that potentially from what I've seen of working with organizations in your industry, they're a little bit behind in terms of using these technologies. And that gives you a great opportunity because it means that you can invest in technologies that will leapfrog other people. So I think that they can be applied in all sorts of ways. But I just think that what would be very important is for you to think about this concept of a digital twin. You're architecting your systems in a way that connects all of these different things together, from predicting demand all the way through getting people in those rooms, getting their feedback, and you're architecting things in those ways. And I would suggest that there are organizations out there that can help you on that journey.
Does this all favor large organizations?
Tapping into this talent and these technologies is costly. But I think that in some industries, what I've seen are smaller organizations coming together, banding together, sharing resources, and embracing systems, investing in systems that they all share, so they can compete against some of the larger ones. Maybe this is an industry that's ripe for that type of approach.
Because certainly in an industry like the hotel industry, where we are quite fragmented, especially in Europe with a lot of smaller companies, it seems like some of that kind of knowledge and processing can be done outside of the hotel company itself. Yep. By other partners, or sometimes it is done by the companies itself. I'm just trying to gauge, where the hotel industry is relative to other industries, and is it an even playing field, or are there things that we can do to make that more even?
With regards to other industries, I think that there's lots of different industries at different states in this journey. So retail are typically a little bit ahead of other organizations like other industries like finance. But when I work with industries, I ask myself two questions. The first question is, are they willing? Do they have the buy-in from the leadership? Do they have the buy-in from the people whose lives this is going to affect to invest in these technologies? And the second question is, are they able? Is their IT infrastructure in the right state? Do they have funding for it? And very often industries don't tick both of those boxes, and it might be a question that you have for yourself. Do you tick those two boxes? Because I think you do if you want to be able to embrace these technologies. Are you willing, and are you able?
Okay. Just a couple more questions. A lighthearted one here. How many cups of coffee do you go through in a day?
I try not to drink coffee, and you'd be surprised that this is me trying to be slow. By the way, this is it is a problem, but I'm going to try.
Okay. And maybe just one last one here. You mentioned that you've got experience working with business and government and in academia.
Yep.
Do you see any big difference in the way that they are approaching either the opportunities or the threats of AI?
So governments are talking about it. And my concern is that they are not in a position to actually do anything that's meaningful. I advise governments on this, and my concern is that industry can move much more quickly now than governments. They can move jurisdictions. They can go to jurisdictions that mean that they don't have to pay taxes or adhere to certain data privacy issues, and so it's very difficult for governments to actually get a handle on this. And that's one of the reasons why I enjoy doing these talks, because again, you are the business leaders that are making these decisions, and I must talk to thousands of CEOs a year, and I hope that somewhere that's going in and helping people think about what impact is actually this going to have on the long term. From an academic perspective, there are academics talking about these things, but unfortunately, what we're seeing at the moment is large organizations hoovering up academic departments. So the large organizations that you can imagine buying departments, buying the talent from those departments, giving them a really nice place to work, lots of money, lots of interesting problems to solve. And my concern is leaving a hole in academia. And this has really only happened over the past 5 years because people are really understanding the importance of these technologies. And again, just going back to the whole industry thing, is that some industries, like for example law, they will typically be fast followers. So they will wait for one law firm to adopt some technologies, and then they'll embrace that technology. I don't think that you can afford to do that anymore. I think that if you get it right with AI straight away, then you're going to maintain that competitive advantage. As I said, we're building a revenue management system for one of the largest hoteliers, and I can't imagine how it would be other organizations going to be able to keep up with them if we get that right. So I think that being a fast first mover is very important. So I guess I would look at your industry and ask yourselves, do you typically follow, or do you invest in innovation?
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Daniel.
Pleasure.
I appreciate it.